The Allen Line Company wishes everyone a happy and prosperous 2024. Be safe out there.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Redding.
Trucking runs through the blood sometimes. A parent passes down the trucking bug to their child, and the cycle continues. Doug and Harry Smith are a perfect example of that. Landline Now senior correspondent Ashley Blackford recently spoke with the father-son duo about their love for trucking and how it's impacted their family through the years. We remain hopeful that 2024 will be the year in which we start seeing some meaningful progress with regard to the truck parking crisis. If that is to happen, groups like the Capital Region Transportation Council will play a big role. They just released a new study on the truck parking situation throughout parts of New York State, and Chris Bauer, the council's director of transportation planning, joins us to talk about what they found. 2 states are acting to significantly increase the number of truck parking spaces within their borders. Wyoming is adding spaces to one location with a history of problems, while Indiana will add spaces to rest areas across that state. We'll talk with both states' DOTs to get the details. And finally, over the past few years, several states have taken a crack at doing something to prevent predatory towing practices on large trucks. One state where an effort to reform those practices has been going on for years is Missouri. I recently spoke with Tom Crawford, president and CEO of the Missouri Trucking Association, about this year's effort. And now, here's Ashley Blackford.
A career behind the wheel of a truck oftentimes stems from a generational love for trucking. Doug Smith and his family are a true example of that. He has been driving a truck for more than 50 years and is a current OOIDA Life member who sits on the board. I spoke with him recently about the generational side of trucking and how that's played a role in his own family.
Well, we're losing a lot of the generational appeal to it. People don't say, son, when you grow up, I want you to be just like me and do what I do, because the job is so hard, and it's very few of us find a niche that we can be what you'd call very successful at it. Most of us are just making a job and going paycheck to paycheck, and the competition kind of screws it down that tight. But there are niches out there, and if you can find what you like to do and somebody pays you well for it, well, you're a lucky man or woman.
Were you the first trucker in your family, or was there?
Well, my dad started this business in 1952 and started me in 1953. And he died when I was 25. He was only 47. And I picked up the yoke from there. My son, I have 3 sons, and one of them is running rock crushers. The middle son has got a tax business, and the third son, his brothers call him my true son. He and I go out and move heavy machines, and he has kind of taken over where I left off as far as, doing jobs, bidding jobs, and getting the work done. And he likes it because it's fun, and we have fun working together. We recently moved 150,000 pound machine, and it was fun, and we got paid for it. That's the best part.
What is that like to work with your son?
It's special. It's to be able to work with family. It can be a blessing or a curse, and it's been a blessing for me. I've got good kids, and there's always family dynamics, but we get through it. And we all know that we've got each other's back, and we're pushing in the same direction.
You must have a lot of special memories on the road with him.
Yeah, we hauled some building material to a church project in Nauvoo, Illinois. And that's where he got his first behind-the-wheel time. The statute of limitations has expired on this, but I let him drive an hour and a half across Nebraska on the way home, until he finally said, I've had enough. But he has always had a feel for the equipment, and he's accident-free, and he's well trusted by a lot of major contractors to move their equipment.
That was Doug Smith talking about how trucking has been an important part of his and his family's lives. Harrison Smith joins me now. He is one of Doug's sons. Harry, what is one of your first memories of being in a truck with your dad?
My first memories in a truck is going to be going on jobs with guys that he worked with. I guess you could say his drivers. My dad ran a small fleet, so he's the independent driver heritage. So my first memory is probably just being a little kid listening to my dad say, "Hey, you can go ride with Cliff. Cliff's going to go take you around for a couple of times," because my dad would be in a pickup truck, right? That's probably my first earliest memories, is being a kid and wanting to ride in the truck so bad that my dad would, choose one of his trusted drivers and let me go ride around with somebody like Cliff for a few rounds. We do dirt hauling. It's a little more cyclical than the typical OIDA member. And so when we say drive a few rounds, you'd ride in circles and haul dirt for a couple hours. And I think those are my earliest memories, is getting in a truck and going in circles, and my dad would be there being the boss, and I'd get to, ride around with a driver, and life was good.
Was there ever a time you decided I'm going to go into trucking, or was that just kind of always the plan?
Oh, I thought I was going to do business management or something, coming up through high school. Oh, I'll go to college and do business management, because you think you been brainwashed into needing a college degree, and you got to go to college. And then about a year and a half into college, you figure out, it's
not all it's cracked up to be.
The title is something that only people who don't understand how our society and how our culture works care about. And so then at that point, I went into a more of a trade-based college degree, a technology degree in construction management. And I mean, I did finish that, but I never stopped trucking, because trucking is how I got through college. And I was like, so it just got me through college, and it was awesome. So why would it was a natural fit.
That was Harry Smith talking about life as a truck driver and the joy of a job that's become a way of life for the Smith family. For Landline Now, I'm Ashley Blackford. Mark, back to you.
Thanks, Ashley. OOIDA is seeking the names and addresses of military personnel serving overseas so we can send them care packages through Truckers for Troops. You can call that information in to Nikki Johnson at our main number, 816-229-5791, or email it to troops@ooida.com. Again, that phone number, 816-229-5791, or email troops@ooida.com. Starting Tuesday, Marty Ellis and OOIDA's tour truck, The Spirit of the American Trucker, will be at the Petro Truck Stop in Weatherford, Texas. That's located at exit 409 on Interstate 20. Stop in, say hi to Marty, and join OOIDA for a $10 discount. Next, we'll get an update on parking plans for New York State from Chris Bauer of the Capital Region Transportation Council. We'll talk with two states' departments of transportation about efforts to increase the number of truck parking spaces, and I'll talk about a towing reform effort with Tom Crawford of the Missouri Trucking Association. We'll be back in just a moment with more news and information. Please stay with us. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
Control your toll costs and eliminate tolling headaches with Prepass Tolls. Prepass Tolls means toll volume discounts. Just one invoice for all tolls and fewer violations. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Landline Now. Welcome back. We remain hopeful that 2024 will be the year in which we start seeing some meaningful progress with regard to the truck parking crisis. If that is to happen, groups like the Capital Region Transportation Council will play a big role. They just released a new study on the truck parking situation throughout parts of New York State. And Chris Bauer, the council's director of transportation planning, joins us on the line to talk about what they found. Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak today.
Yes, thank you for joining us. This is an interesting survey we're going to get into here in just a moment. But before we get into the problem and possible solutions, I want to make sure we understand the lay of the land here. Your group, as I mentioned there, the Capital Region Transportation Council, tell us about what you do and which regions you're focused on in particular.
Sure. So the Capital Region Transportation Council is the federally designated metropolitan planning organization, or MPO as we call it in our world, for 4 counties in upstate New York: Albany County, Rensselaer County, Saratoga County, and Schenectady County. Technically, there's actually a small part of Saratoga County that's not part of it, but we generally are known as the Capital Region or Capital District of New York State, Albany being the capital. Like I said, we're federally designated. We are charged with facilitating a transportation planning process by federal law, and we're supported with federal funding. So, our members, if you will, we're a unit of regional government. So our members are cities, towns, villages, counties, DOT, port, airport.
So you've clearly got a wide net there that you cast on a lot of issues. And as I said at the start here, this is in particular specifically a truck parking study that was done. Can you take me back to the origins of this study? When, how, and why did it get started?
Sure. So a lot of things kind of converged for us to do this study. Truck parking traditionally really is not a topic that MPOs cover too often or really study too often, maybe other than just to point it out as being an issue in the trucking industry. But we saw a lot of things converging, at all levels. On the federal level, you had Jason's Law and the enactment of that. You had the new Federal Motor Carrier Safety Association or Administration Hours of Service rules. So that kind of exacerbated the problem, if you will. At the state level, well, actually, let me back up 1 second. Also at the federal level, with the passing of the bipartisan infrastructure law, you had for the first time the requirement that states consider truck parking in their state freight transportation plans, and our New York State DOT is updating their state freight transportation plan. So you have federal level, state level, and then at our regional level, we have a freight advisory committee that meets quarterly here. And truck parking has always been a top, topic here. And, truck parking is not a huge issue in our region, but we really didn't want to just say that and brush it off. We wanted to do something. We wanted to address the concerns of our freight advisory committee. So, this was an effort for us to really understand, okay, what are the issues in our region? What is the supply and demand? And try to get our arms around it so that when these other state and federal initiatives are being tackled, that we have, kind of an informed, opinion and point of view on that.
Yeah, and I think that's important because it sounds like you're taking a proactive approach to this issue, which, as anybody listening to this knows because they live it, this is a real problem nationwide. You mentioned that the truck parking shortage, the crisis, isn't necessarily a huge problem where you are. And obviously this study that you did, I think it's 43 pages or something like that, goes over it in great detail. What did you find out about the scope of the problem? How bad is the truck parking situation, again, in the area that you are?
So in the Capital Region, we are close to full utilization during the peak overnight hours. So we did counts at all of our major truck parking areas in the region, and we actually had a little bit of a buffer around the edge too, because we realized once we started, and on the advisement of our freight committee, they said, hey, you really got to look a little bit outside your boundaries to get the full picture here. We're about 95%-ish utilized during peak overnight hours on weekdays. So, the way that we see that is, okay, it's maybe not a problem yet, but what can we do, seeing what's happening in the rest of the country, what can we do to address the issue? And we really wanted to look deeper than just at the supply and demand, but we also, it was really a data-driven approach. We used some data that we purchased from the American Transportation Research Institute, ATRI. It was truck parking data for all the major facilities in our region, and we were able to mine that data with their assistance and with assistance of our consultant to understand really what are the underlying issues here. In other words, is a truck parking in our region at these different facilities, are they going somewhere locally? Are they just somewhere, on a midpoint of a trip? And because we really felt like the solution would be different depending on what the situation was. And we found, for each parking area that there were different circumstances, if you will, that were impacting what was happening there. And so with that information, we were able to create a parking profile for each of our major locations and also develop recommendations that look at, we didn't just want to say, okay, DOT, add, 100 more spaces here, 100 more spaces there, because we feel like it's more than just that. This is a public and private solution to this very big and complex problem. And to be in reality, in our world, we're replacing bridges, we're paving roads, and truck parking often doesn't rise to the top of that list. So we really wanted to shed some light on the issue, to talk about our role in that, so like I said, not just increasing the supply and demand or supply at our state-run or throughway-run stops, but also what can our local municipalities do when they have a large commercial industrial site or a new industrial park or something like that coming in? What are the questions that they can ask the developer? What can they do on site? Perhaps provide a little bit of parking on site, and so we can all sort of chip away at the issue.
You said something earlier, and I want to circle back to it because you said, and I think you said, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but you mentioned metropolitan planning organizations like yours don't necessarily look at the truck parking situation, or at least it's not a priority on the list there. Through your research here and, this study, do you think that that's something that needs to change? I know you can't speak for other organizations that are out there, but it sounds like something that maybe should be taken into more account when decisions are being made. Is that a fair assessment?
I think we would agree with that. I think it's, we see the importance of it. One thing that I did, for me, right, I'm not a freight professional. I'm a transportation planner, kind of like I said, dealing more in that world of just traffic and traffic signals and bridges and things like that. So it was a learning experience for me, for sure. One thing I learned from our, outreach is that it's a relatively small geographic area to study truck parking. And a lot of the folks that we talked to in the industry said, well, yeah, it's not that bad here. It's bad when I get 200 miles from here or whatever. And we were like, great. But just tell us can you tell us a little bit about our region and what you think is going on here? So I think the geographic scale makes it challenging, but I do think it's important for MPOs to understand freight issues and truck parking being, paramount amongst those.
Yeah, and as I look at any study like this, I always look to see if you are actually reaching out to the people who are affected by it. And in this case, as you mentioned there, you did speak to commercial truck drivers about the problems that they face, not just in your area, but elsewhere. And as you found out, and you may have known this as before as well, but it is a real problem out there in a lot of places. And even if it's not a huge issue there now, as you said earlier as well, it may be an issue down the line here because you are getting close to reaching, full capacity there. Real quick here, we've got a few minutes left, but you kind of touched on some of the possible solutions here. What does that look like moving forward as you pay more attention to this issue and try to, stave off any problems that may come down the line here? What do the solutions look like? Because I know you've got a few here in this report that kind of lay out what you should maybe be doing. What does that look like?
Sure. So, I think some of the traditional solutions, are just looking at when there's an opportunity to maybe expand a parking area in a distressed area where we're seeing this high demand. whether it be through the New York State DOT areas or the New York State Thruway areas. That's kind of like this, I don't want to say simple one, but that's kind of the obvious one. We are also highly encouraging our members, particularly those that control zoning, like in New York cities, towns, and villages, to consider truck parking in their zoning requirements for commercial industrial sites so that, they can chip away perhaps at some of the issue with that. We're also looking at some things that might be maybe a little more towards the environmental side. So opportunities, if they exist for electrification or idle reduction technology to be implemented. There's a lot of grants and things like that out there. So we just wanted to sort of have that as a possibility. And then also, one thing that we identified as a potential issue that's related, but perhaps not a day-to-day issue, is looking at emergency operations for truck parking. So in situations here where perhaps we get, a big snowstorm, a big weather event, something like that, what we could do in our region to handle emergency truck parking needs. And that's something that we saw as a potential future opportunity as well.
Yeah, I got to say it's encouraging to hear from folks like yourself who work with, councils, organizations, groups who are becoming more aware of this issue, because it is a real issue, as I said, for the people living this every day. And again, if the issue isn't bad there now, it doesn't mean it won't be bad in the future. But now that you have that awareness, it should help the issue along as we get there. We always get on our soapbox here on the radio program and Landline Magazine, and anybody who's associated with the truck driving community, preach to our listeners all the time the importance of getting involved, reaching out, helping to move this issue along. If there are some New York State truck drivers listening right now, is there a place they can go, a website they can check out, or another way to get involved and help your council get the ball moving on these issues, help your council understand what these issues are, so they can, again, make for a better environment for everybody out there?
Yeah, so that's great. We'd love to have inputs from the freight community. They're certainly better than folks like me who are trying to, view this from above. But so like I mentioned, we have a freight advisory committee. On that group, it's open to the public, so really anyone can attend. We do have representatives from OIDA and also from Trucking Association of New York. So they can engage with us directly, or they can engage, through those organizations with us. Of course, in New York State, as I mentioned earlier, New York State DOT is updating their state freight transportation plan. And I encourage anybody listening to, provide input to that process as well. I think that's going to be really important, for us and for the state as well. And I don't have a web address or anything like that handy, but, if you Google New York State Freight Transportation Plan Update, certainly be probably the first one that would come up. And our organization, Capital Region Transportation Council, again, we're www.capitalmpo.org. And our Freight Advisory Committee meets quarterly, and always love to have input from the freight community. Absolutely.
Yeah, that feedback is invaluable. Chris, as I mentioned, it's refreshing to see a council like yours take on this issue and take a look at it with a serious eye and look for solutions. So we appreciate you doing that, and we also appreciate you being on the show today.
You're very welcome. And, just definitely just wanted to real quick thank Gannett Fleming, Tom Phelan probably taught me most of what I know about truck parking, and our members, especially our cities, towns, villages, and their elected representatives who supported this project and saw the importance as well.
Sounds good. Chris, thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
That was Chris Bauer of the Capital Region Transportation Council, and this is a break, but stick around. We've got plenty more Landline Now to come.
Attention professional drivers, are you behind on your tax filings? You owe money? Integrity Tax Relief Group frees drivers from IRS trouble. You watch the road, we'll keep an eye on the IRS. Call now, 855-976-4291.
Dispatch, I picked up that load of steel, so I'm ready to roll.
Sounds good. Remember, we're getting paid by weight, so make sure to use a cat scale.
I wouldn't weigh anywhere else.
Forget miss accuracy, weigh your truck on a cat scale.
Wyoming will see hundreds of additional truck parking spaces under a plan by the state's Department of Transportation. You're listening to Landline Now, and I'm your host, Mark Redding. Welcome back to the program. Jordan Young is the Deputy Public Affairs Officer at the Wyoming DOT. She spoke with me about the plan and what's involved. I'm wondering if you can just tell me broadly about this grant the Wyoming Department of Transportation has received to build truck parking in Evanston.
Yeah, so we did receive a grant from the Federal Rural Surface Transportation Grant for about $26.6 million to build just over 365 semi-truck parking spaces along Interstate 80, just east of Evanston. So right there kind of by the Utah border. It's a common place to see a lot of trucks waiting for winter road closures to reopen, as well as just, providing truck parking for hours of service requirements and those other kind of rest requirements to make sure that drivers have a safe place to meet those requirements.
Will the state be matching any of that money, or is this strictly working off the federal investment?
Yes, we do have a match. So the total project cost is approximately $33.3 million. So that would be the grant plus the match.
Okay. What sort of services will be available at the parking area? I mean, are they going to be like restrooms, or is this just parking?
It's just parking. It's along the right-of-way, kind of parallel to the right-of-way, so there's not a ton of room to add additional amenities. But the Uinta County Senior, I'm trying to make sure I get the Uinta County Senior Citizens Board receives federal transit funding for that area to help with transit in the city of Evanston. And so they've also volunteered to help transport truck drivers during major storm events when there's a prolonged closure of I-80. They're going to use those transit resources that they already have in place to help get those truck drivers to amenities a little closer into town. So we do have kind of a mechanism in place for those long duration closures.
Okay. Do you have some idea of what this is going to look like? Are we too far in advance to tell at this point?
I do know that it's all within our right-of-way, so we do expect a lot of it to be kind of parallel parking along the highway. We have a few other truck parking areas kind of similar looking along I-80, and the majority of the parking spaces will be for the trucks going eastbound, since they're right there at the Utah border. A lot of those trucks heading west can just continue on to Utah during those long closure events. There is some parking on the westbound side to handle overflow from the eastbound, and for those hours of service folks, or for folks heading west to meet their hours of service. But the majority of the parking spaces will be for the eastbound drivers.
What's the timeline for getting this up and running?
Right now, we think construction is expected to begin in about spring 2026, depending on how long it takes for design. And then, the project letting schedule, we can't do a lot of that kind of work in the winter. We try to do what we can, but with our winters being as harsh as they are, a lot of construction activity takes place in the summer. So that timing sometimes impacts what year it starts as well. But we're hoping to get it started here soon.
Does the Wyoming DOT see this as an end goal, or do you anticipate other projects to add more truck parking in the state?
This one we worked really closely with the local government agencies in Uinta County as well as in Evanston. So it was a very collaborative effort to respond to issues during those long duration closures on I-80 specific to that community. But we are always looking at adding safe places for trucks to park. We just wrapped up a truck parking project between Rawlins and Laramie that also added, I believe, almost 200 spaces. So, we're kind of continuing to look at safe places for parking. I can't think of another specific project we have on the pipeline besides this one, but it is something we keep in mind, especially with I-80 being such a heavy freight corridor through the nation.
What's the overall picture as far as truck parking in this state?
I think, like I said, we're always looking at ways we can make it safer for freight drivers through our state. I can't speak to specific goals or where we're at on how many spaces we have in the whole state. I would have to do some digging on that. But looking at our 511 map, we do have a layer that shows truck parking along our interstates, and we do have quite a few options, in each between towns and then along in the towns. So, we do try to help folks find those safe places to park, especially with our winters being as notorious as they are. But I think it is something we continue to look at and continue to strive for increased safety along our interstates.
This is over on the western end of the state, as I understand it. Are you looking at a similar project on the eastern side for trucks coming that direction?
In Cheyenne, we are seeing some increased interest in truck stops, more private industry route. So I definitely think, we work with those businesses on access and things like that to the rights of way. But I don't know of any, federal funding or grant funding that's being used over there at this time. But, we typically don't see the overflow in Cheyenne. Cheyenne can handle a lot more traffic with its larger size and population than Evanston. And then there's also I-25 to help funnel folks down or up, depending on where they're headed, to try to alleviate some of that backup. But compared to Evanston, where that's kind of where you enter the state, and there's not a lot of alternative routes away from Evanston, you do see a lot more trucks parking over there. So, like I said, we were kind of working with the local government over there to alleviate an issue that they were seeing on the ground during those long-term closures for winter storms. We had a lot of local and state support for the project, so we're really thrilled that we were awarded the grant. It is our third federal grant in a year that we were awarded. Not specific. The other grants aren't specific to commercial vehicles, but it is exciting to see that the federal government is working with us to, accomplish some of these projects and goals that we've had. So, definitely want to give the FHWA and USDOT a shout out as well for their, them recognizing that this was a needed project.
Jordan Young, the Deputy Public Affairs Officer at the Wyoming Department of Transportation. Indiana is going a step further than Wyoming, a big step, with a near doubling of available rest area parking across the entire state under a new plan. Natalie Garrett is the Strategic Communications Director of the Indiana Department of Transportation. She spoke with me about that plan, including the specifics on truck parking and other improvements. I wanted to ask about the state DOT's plan to create more truck parking. First of all, how much parking are we talking about and where would it be?
Yeah, so I'll kind of give just a general overview to start. So the truck parking expansion is part of NDOT's 10-year plan to improve rest areas and welcome centers across the state. So we're looking at adding more than 1,200 additional semi-trailer parking spaces, and that will occur at various locations across the state. Some of these locations are welcome centers, and they're being completely redone with additional truck parking. We're also doing some conversions of existing rest areas to truck parking only locations. So your typical rest area amenities will be removed. It will be only truck parking. There will be a restroom facility available, but we're looking at more than 1,200 additional parking spaces. That's nearly double what we have now existing across the state.
You mentioned the two rest areas to be converted into truck parking, and you mentioned that there would be restrooms. Would there be any other facilities available at those locations?
At the truck parking conversion locations, it would just be restroom facilities. I believe 7 individual restrooms there would be available at those locations.
Okay. You mentioned in addition to creating more truck parking that this is going to modernize the existing rest areas. I'm wondering if you can kind of give us some detail in terms of what other sorts of improvements will be made as part of this plan to those rest areas.
Yeah. So construction of new buildings is is part of that. We have a couple that are under construction currently, and one that just opened up in Northwest Indiana this fall, the Kankakee Welcome Center on I-65 southbound. So new buildings, improved parking facilities, a number of amenities will be added. An aspect of the plan is to create a destination of sorts for travelers, travelers of all kinds, to provide a safe, relaxing environment for those drivers to rest and recharge. These improved welcome centers include walking paths, dog parks, recreation areas, some interactive, informative exhibits, and as well as some commissioned art.
I'm curious, how much does the DOT estimate this will cost, and how is the state going to pay for that cost?
We're investing more than $600 million across, I think it's around 21 locations across the state, and this is federal funding, that we're receiving for these improvements.
Okay. What spurred the state to consider this plan?
So we knew that our existing network of rest areas and welcome centers needed to be modernized. NDOT receives a number of customer concerns regarding our rest areas and welcome centers each year. So this plan is a way for us to address these needs and concerns, as well as provide a safer, more modernized locations for people to stop, rest, recharge while traveling. We also have heard from the trucking industry that there's a need for additional truck parking. We're aware of that. So this is a way that we can help address that issue as well.
I want to talk about that a little bit. We know there's a national truck parking shortage, and you mentioned that the industry there in Indiana indicated that there was a need for more truck parking. What is the current state of truck parking, and how far would this plan go towards solving the shortage in your state?
Yeah, I don't have those numbers in front of me, the industry numbers in general, but NDOT believes that this is a first step, if you will, in addressing that shortage and providing more options and, more truck parking for the industry across the state.
Okay. Do you have a timeline for completion of the additional truck parking and other improvements?
So all 21 locations are expected to be complete by the end of fiscal year 2034. The document that I sent over to you yesterday outlines kind of location by location, what that timeline currently looks like.
Excellent. Natalie, thank you very much for your time.
No problem.
That was Natalie Garrett, Strategic Communications Director of the Indiana Department of Transportation, talking about a plan to significantly increase truck parking in the state. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Stock up on Howe's Diesel Treat, the nation's most trusted anti-gel. And to be safe from the harshest winter conditions, make sure you have Howe's Diesel Lifeline on hand, the fastest-acting gelling rescue product. Available nationwide, Howe's products are designed to keep you rolling through the toughest conditions. Visit Howe'sProducts.com.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Landline Now. Welcome back. Over the past few years, several states have taken a crack at doing something to prevent predatory towing practices on large trucks. The problem involves non-consensual towing, instances where, for example, a truck has been in a wreck and the police or some other first responder calls for a tow truck, meaning the trucker has no choice. While most people in the towing sector are honest, in some places predatory towing operations have charged outrageous bills. One state where an effort to reform those practices has been going on for years is Missouri. And I spoke recently with Tom Crawford, president and CEO of the Missouri Trucking Association, about this year's effort. So there is a new effort this year to pass towing reform for large trucks in Missouri. First, would you outline the bill and some of the details of what the bill would do?
This is kind of another attempt, if you will, at something that we've been working together with OIDA, Missouri Trucking Association, and several of our collective members on for the past several sessions. And last session, we had a bill filed that actually got some movement, was working its way through the process. And, as the legislative process gets, sometimes it just kind of got hung up. But we had some good discussions going, and also we basically refiled that legislation from last session. And basically what the bill does is it kind of outlines a process that after, and again, this is just for an accident happens on the road and some sort of law enforcement or other government official or somebody trying to clear the road calls a towing company or a wrecker to come and get the commercial vehicle. It's not the instances where the trucking company or the owner-operator or somebody has an issue and is calling the tow truck or wrecker company out themselves. This is what we call a non-consensual towing situation. So something happens and the folks are trying to get the road cleared, and so you don't get to pick your provider, if you will. You just kind of take whoever comes up and tries to hook up and take off with your equipment. So that's the premise of where we're starting on this. This year's bill is House Bill 2214, again sponsored by Representative Dave Griffith from the Jefferson City area of the state. He has been a longtime supporter and has worked on these issues and the various attempts at the issues for several sessions, basically since he became a legislator. And so he's been a very good supporter. And what it does is it allows, so you have the situation, there's already some processes in place for what happens, but this kind of makes some changes. So if something happens and your equipment's taken and it's impounded or put in in the company's lot, you can go and get your personal property out of it. Say you've got the driver has some medications or, their cell phone or their tablet or their documents or something like that. They can come and get their documents. There's no charge for that. The company can't hold those. And then the part that kind of got everything riled up last year and got the attention of some of the towing companies was you can get that equipment out of hock by basically a down payment of 30% on the bill to have that property released. And so that kind of got folks' attention in the towing world and got them to come in and actually hired some contract lobbyists for a couple of companies in and of themselves trying to work with us to negotiate a little different number or something like that. So that's the broad outlines of the legislation. It's basically, hey, looking across the country, looking across this state, what is something that's being done? How can we protect truckers and folks that, again, most of the times through no fault of their own, their equipment ends up being impounded by a tower or a wrecker company, maybe fraudulently, maybe not fraudulently, but what's the process in place to get them their equipment back and get them back to making money so those bills can get paid? That's kind of the broad outlines of the legislation. And legislature just started about a week ago. We're 1 week in, and the House has had several hearings and kind of moving on. The Senate is a different animal, and it takes a little bit longer to get to that process. But we're looking to some hearings starting possibly next week in the Senate. Some have been heard this week, but not very many. So that's the broad outlines, Mark.
Now, in some other states that have attempted various types of towing reform, there's been either a limit on the amount that can be charged for a tow or a schedule or an appeals process if someone thinks they've been charged too much. Is there anything like that in this bill?
Not at the current time. As you and I have talked in past years, we've had a lot of different efforts to put different processes, different task force, different fee schedules, different whatever in place. And We had one make it to the governor's desk a few years ago and got vetoed. Well, that governor is still here, so we're trying to navigate the process and get something on the governor's desk that will be acceptable. And so this is, in discussions with your folks, your legislative, your grassroots folks in OIDA and ourselves, trying to come up with something, looking at what other states have done. This got their attention, and it got some traction last year. So we're going to continue to push on that. Our ultimate goal absolutely would get to have a little more process in place in Missouri. Fortunately, we don't have a huge problem with this issue in Missouri. We've got pretty responsible towing community. We've got good law enforcement community. So we've got good partners, if you will, in the process. But as your listeners and my members and OIDA's members can attest to daily, we have issues that happen in Missouri, and OIDA can help kind of navigate those. But other than leaning on the collective strength of our organization, there is no process in place other than appeal to the consumer division at the Attorney General's office or hiring a private attorney yourself for a driver or a company to try to get these things resolved. And again, these are situations that the company or the driver is a bystander, if you will. They're not calling the company out to have a tow. It's some state entity or government official calling this tow truck company out, and the driver and company is kind of take it or leave it. This is what the bill is. So we're trying to put something in place, baby steps, if you will, to kind of get the process going here in Missouri and kind of get the door open a little bit. But I think neither OIDA nor Missouri Trucking Association is satisfied with, if this bill would pass, this isn't enough.
What did the governor say were his objections to some of the past efforts?
Going back in my memory, I think part of the problem was, at that point, the issue was a task force that was being put together, and we were trying to give the task force some responsibilities, and they did not think that we had the authority to give a task force those kinds of responsibilities. And then the second part of that was just the way the legislative process kind of unfolded. They didn't like our legislation kind of tagging along with some other legislation. So read between the lines what you want on that, but those were the statements in the letter. We were, as was OIDA, a little surprised with the response and seeing this issue show up in the letter from the governor's office, because we had met with the governor's office earlier that year and kind of outlined our issues and where we were headed. And there was no indication that would be a problem. When the year that happened, I think we spent some time on the phone, and I know a letter was generated jointly between us, I think, to the governor's office expressing our frustration with that. So we've kind of let that go and moving forward, trying to find a solution for our membership. This is one that has had some movement last year. As much as there's probably not much legislatively that'll go this session, we're hopeful that this has started the process enough last year that we might have a shot this year of getting across the finish line.
That was Tom Crawford, President and CEO of the Missouri Trucking Association, talking about HB 2214, a bill to reform towing practices in the state. Missouri truckers are encouraged to call their state lawmakers about the bill. Again, HB 2214. You can get contact information at fightingfortruckers.com. That's our show for today. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife,
I'm a writer,
photographer,
I farm,
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
Chrome, and I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us!
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA.
the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit ooida.com.